Hi all. This is the demo of hosting a static website on a cloud provider, and it's part of the 10 weeks CloudOps challenge where the goal is to host a static website on AWS, Azure, or GCP and implement CI/CD for the same. So in this demo, I will be hosting the static website on Azure, and I'll be using some of the Azure services like Azure Storage, Azure CDN, and also the GitHub Actions to achieve CI/CD for the same. So first, let's look into the architecture. So basically, we have a storage account in Azure, and we will create a container into which we will be hosting our static website. And we also have a provision to associate this storage endpoint to Azure CDN profile. And the user can actually use the CDN endpoint to access the website which is hosted on Azure. And we also have a provision to map a custom domain to the CDN profile. So in our demo, I have created my own custom domain with one of the DNS provider and registrar named Namecheap.com. And I have also created a CNAME entry in such a way that whenever the user hits the custom domain which I created, it gets redirected to the Azure CDN endpoint and the request is being served from the CDN profile thereafter. So the request and response flow goes like this. So the user hits the custom domain which hosts a static website, and the DNS service provider resolves this custom domain and returns the user with the Azure CDN endpoint. And then the request hits the Azure CDN profile where the CDN first checks its local cache if it has any cached copy of the static website. If not, it then forwards the request to the storage account, retrieves the static website, caches it, and then delivers the website to the end user. And in order to automate this, like whenever a developer makes some changes to the static website and pushes his source code to the GitHub, we can make use of GitHub Actions to continuously integrate and deploy these changes to the storage account. So basically, in this demo, we will be creating a resource group under which we will be grouping all our resources which we'll be creating for the demo, and then we'll create a storage account. We will host a static website, map a custom domain, map a CDN profile, and then associate a custom domain for that. Once all these are done, we will then see a GitHub workflow where we can see the steps involved in deploying the changes to the storage account. Yeah, let's get into the demo. Let's go into the steps one by one. So the first step is to host a static website. For that, we will create a resource group to organize the Azure resources we'll be creating. And then we'll create a storage account under the resource group and enable the static website and upload the default and error HTML web pages in the web container. And let's try to access the primary endpoint. So I will log in into my Azure account. We will first create a resource group. So let's call it as static resource group. The resource group is created. The next step is to create a storage account. So we'll create a storage account. Let's name it a static web essay and see if it is available. No, so I'm just giving a unique name. Let's go with the locally redundant storage. Then let's leave all the other parameters as default. Let's create the storage account. So the deployment is in progress. Let's wait once it's done. So once it is done, our next step will be to enable the static website for that and upload the, the basic HTML page which the website has to deliver. Yeah, the deployment is complete. Let's go to the storage account. Yeah, so this is our storage account. And before that, I just want to show you that there are no containers currently available except for the logs. So let's enable the static website and see if a new container gets created. So just scroll down and yeah, enable the static website. And let's give index document name. So it is the name of the web page that Azure Storage returns when a request is made to the root of the website. So I'm going to name it as index.html and error document. Like if the user tries to access some invalid path, then we are going to render a 404 for that. So I'm going to create or I'm going to have another HTML page called 404.html, and let's save this. And this is the endpoint which gets created. So basically, we have enabled public access to this. So initially, we should be able to see our HTML pages which we upload to the storage account from this endpoint. Now let's go and check the containers. If you see, we have a web container which got created after we enabled the static website. So let's go into this. So in order to deliver the index.html and the 404 pages, we have to upload our HTML files to this path. So let's upload it. Yeah, I have an index.html page. I will show you what are all the contents inside that. Let me upload it. Yeah, we got the index.html, and let me also upload 404 file. Yeah. So basically, this 404.html has a content like, yeah. So whenever the user tries to access a path which is invalid, we are going to render some content called 404 not found HTML. And if he is going to access the root of the website, then we are going to show that this is HTML, index.html page. So yeah, we are done with the first step, which is hosting a static website. So let's first check if we are able to access it from the storage account endpoint. For this, I think we can go to the static website, get the endpoint. Let me put it here. Yeah, we got the index.html since we are accessing the root. Now I will just request for some part which is not there. So let me check for index1.html, which we have not uploaded to the container. Yes, so when we are trying to access the invalid file, we are getting the 404. Now let's get. So the step 2 is to integrate it with an Azure CDN. For that, we have to create a CDN profile and associate the CDN endpoint to the storage account. So let's go into the storage. Let's go into the storage account, and let's click on the CDN. Currently, there are no endpoints, so we'll be creating a new one. Let me give some CDN profile name, static web profile, and let's go with the static pricing tier. Let's give a name, and we have to, okay, this name is not unique, so I'm just going to change it. Just going to give a random name. Yeah, I think this name is now allowed. And let me click the static website. If you see here, the same as what we tried to access in step 1. Let's create. So this is definitely going to take some time. Let's wait until the deployment is complete. So let's see if our CDN is created. Yeah, our CDN is created and it shows the status as running. Let's check this. So this is the CDN profile name, and this is the CDN name, and this is the endpoint which we have created, and this will be resolving to the origin host name. This is same as what we saw in the step 2, which is the storage account endpoint. And first, let's see if we are able to access this. Yeah, currently it shows page not found because it is taking some time for the CDN changes to get reflected. Meanwhile, if you see, it is by default HTTPS enabled, and if you see here, the connection is secure, and it is being automatically created by Microsoft, and it creates its own certificate signing request. And if we see the provider, it is being the certificate is provided by the DigiCert, and we can see the other certificate details in this. And yeah, we are done with step 2. Now we'll go to step 3, where we will be mapping our own custom domain. For that, we need a DNS registrar with which we should have created our own custom domain. So here, create your own custom domain by registering it with some DNS registrar, and map the desired subdomain with the CDN endpoint which is obtained in the previous step. So in our demo, I have already created a custom domain for me in namecheap.com, and let's see the domain name. So for that, let's go to the advanced DNS. So if you see, my domain name is called janani.tework.site, and I have created a CNAME record where the subdomain www of this main domain is going to point to the parking page of namecheap.com. So first check what is this parking page. Let's see the contents. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the content. These are the contents which we see in the parking page.namecheap.com. And in my settings, I have mapped my custom domain, my subdomain called www to this parking page namecheap.com. So let's check if that is reflected. So let me give www dot, this is my domain, and let's give enter. So if you see, both domains are same because the request from here is being redirected to the parking page. Similarly, we are going to achieve the same for our CDN profile as well. So for that, we need to create one more CNAME record for our own new subdomain. Let me create a CNAME. Let me call it as static web, and the target is going to be yeah, we will go to the custom domain here, create a custom domain, and we can copy the target from here. This is the target. So let me put it here, and let's save. So whenever the user tries to access static web dot janani.tework.site, the request should be redirected to our CDN. So let's now um, map the custom domain to the CDN profile. I think that is going to be the step 2, where we associate the newly created subdomain with our CDN endpoint. So let me create, yeah, so the custom name is going to be static web dot the domain name. Yeah, the Azure CDN has validated that this is a proper domain name. So let me add it. So this is definitely going to take some time. Meanwhile, let's see if the CDN endpoint is up. Yeah, the CDN is still not up. So let's wait for some time. Yeah, I think our CDM custom domain is created, but we have a notification telling that it might take up to 10 minutes for the static web dot our domain name to reach the CDN. Before that, let's see if the CDN endpoint is accessible. Yeah, so earlier we were getting 404 for this. So currently we can see the CDN endpoint delivering the index.html. Let's check for invalid a path. Yeah, so we are able to see both the index.html as well as the 404 .html which we uploaded to the container. And yeah, so let's go and check the custom domain. So currently, if you see in this custom domain, the HTTPS is disabled by default. So the next step is to validate our custom domain. For that, we can either create our own certificates to validate that we own the domain and upload it in the Azure Key Vault, or we can leverage the Azure CDN managed certificates. So in this demo, we will be making use of the Azure CDN managed certificates, for which we can just turn on the custom domain HTTPS. And if you see, we have two options. Either we can use the Azure CDN certificates, where Azure itself validates the domain, creates a certificate signing request, submits it to a certificate authority, and validates the domain. Or else we can use your own certificate, where we will be uploading our certificate in the Azure Key Vault, and also the secret and the certificate version and all the other prerequisites. In our case, let's use the CDN managed certificate, and let's save this. So again, this is going to take some more time. Meanwhile, let's check if the custom domain which we created is accessible. Uh, yes. So now if you see, um, we are able to see the subdomain which we created and mapped it to the Azure CDN, but it says that it does not support HTTP because we have just enabled HTTPS, and the changes are just getting reflected. So let's wait until HTTPS is enabled. For this, Azure first sends a certificate signing request to the CA and validates it. So yeah, this is the request flow. So it will first submit the request and does the domain validation, and then the certificate is provisioned. Once everything is complete, we can see our own custom domain which is pointing to the CDN, and we can see the HTTPS being enabled. So let's wait for some more time. It has taken nearly 20 to 30 minutes for validating the certificate. So if you see the request flow, first the Azure CDN has submitted the request and the domain is being validated. The certificate is provisioned and the HTTPS has been enabled on our domain. So let's check if the custom domain is able to serve our static website. So yeah. So now if you see, HTTPS is enabled and it's able to deliver the index.html. Let's also check for the negative case. Yeah, it's delivering the 404. And meanwhile, if you see the certificates, it says the connection is secure and the certificate is being issued by DigiCert. And these are the certificate details. Uh, yeah, let's go back to our repository. So we have successfully completed hosting a static website, integrating with CDN, and mapping the custom domain. Now our final goal is to implement CICD for the same, for which we need a GitHub repo. So this is my GitHub repo, and our main goal is whenever I create a new HTML page, or whenever I make changes to the default HTML which we have uploaded to the storage account, we have to make sure that these HTML pages are being uploaded to our storage account. For this, we need a service principal with necessary permissions for this GitHub application to make some changes to the Azure resources. In our case, whenever we are trying to push the latest changes in the HTML files to the storage account, we should need necessary permission for the GitHub publication to push the changes to the storage account. For which we create a service principal, and this is the command. So here we give AC add service principal. We create a RBAC role, and the role is going to be a contributor role, and this is going to be the resource group name. And once you execute this command, we can see the service principal being created. So I have already created one. Let me show you that. So you have to go to Azure Active Directory, then you have to go to app registrations and all applications. So this is something which I created before the demo. Similarly, if you are going to execute this command, then a new service principal named myml will be created in the app registrations. So you should be able to see your service principal listed here. So once that is done, we have to create a GitHub workflow file. So this is going to trigger a GitHub action. So by configuring the GitHub action, we can make sure that we can automatically deploy our site or our HTML files, which we change in our GitHub repository to Azure, and whenever the dev makes changes to the source code. So where this file resides. So let me go to the repositories. So this is the repository root folder, under which I have created another folder called .github. Inside that, you can find a folder called workflows, under which you have a YAML file. And it need not be with the name main.yaml, it can be with any name. Let me go to that. So this is how the YAML file looks like. In order to learn more about this, we can go and check out the GitHub documentation. And let's go through this YAML file now. So now the workflow name is Azure Static Website, and this is going to be the run name. And this job gets triggered for every push that is made to the main branch. Similarly, you can change this branch. Currently we have only main. Similarly, if you have any branch, any other new branches, you can change that. And this is how we configure the job. So the job name is push site to Azure, and where should this run? This is going to run on a Ubuntu latest container. This is ideally called a runner, which the GitHub itself creates when this workflow gets executed. So once a container named Ubuntu latest is created by the GitHub runner, these are the steps which gets executed. The first one is to check out the source code repository, for which the syntax is actions and checkout for version 2. This is ideally going to clone our repository, the current repository inside the runner. After which we need login permissions to Azure, so that this will enable authentication of our GitHub account, for which we use some credentials called Azure credentials. I will show you where to configure that, because this is now being configured as a secret. So let me show you in the settings file where I have configured this. Once we have successfully logged into the Azure, once we have made a successful Azure login, our next goal is to deploy our static website. So if you see the command, it's easy storage blob upload batch, and the account name is being got from the Azure credentials, and the connection string is going to be the storage account connection string, and the destination, like where do we want to upload the HTML files to. So that is going to be web container, which we already saw in the step 1, and it's going to copy the current folder. The -s means the source and dot means the current folder. Similarly, you can have a folder structure as well. And what are all the files that needs to be uploaded? So the pattern which matches .html star.html are going to be uploaded to the web container. So I will show you where to get the storage a connection string. So for this, go to Azure, your storage account, and access keys, and you can get any of these. So you can either use this one or this one, anything is fine. So let me copy this, and before the start of the demo I have already configured these secrets. So this is how you get a storage account. And similarly, since we are using the CDN, we don't want the CDN to, cache any old content, for which we purge the cache, and this is the command to clear the cache. And again, we have some secrets being used here. So I will show you where to add these secrets. And finally, we log out from the Azure, and yeah, this is the end of the workflow. So I will show you where to um, configure the secrets, for which you go to the repository, and I think I have to log in this. Just a minute. Yeah, so I have logged into the GitHub. So once you do a successful login, you should be able to see something called settings where we have our secrets stored. And before that, let me give you an overview of what we are trying to achieve. So whenever any of the files in this GitHub repository is being changed, or when a developer pushes or does a pull request to any of the files, the GitHub workflow gets triggered, the GitHub Actions gets triggered, and then it will deploy all the HTML files in the root folder to the storage account which we have created. So currently, if you see the containers, we have a web container under which we have only two files. So our goal is to make some changes to any of the files and see if an action gets triggered and the demo2.html gets uploaded to the storage account. So we will go to the settings, see where the secrets are being added. So go to secrets, then actions. So these are the secrets which are used in the workflow YAML file. So first is a CDN name. So this is ideally going to be the CDN endpoint name which we created. For that, go to the portal, go to the endpoint, and this is going to be the endpoint name. So you configure that as CDN name, then the profile name. The profile name is going to be static web profile. I hope you remember the one which we created in our previous steps. And then we have a resource group name. So the resource group name is going to be static web resource group, and the Azure credentials. So this credentials is going to be the output of the service principal command which we executed. So I have added here. So when we run this command, we will get a JSON file. Just copy paste that to to the Azure credentials. And finally, we have the storage account, Azure storage connection string, which I showed you where to get it from. So maybe I will repeat it again. So go to the storage account. Sorry. Go to the storage account, access keys, and copy this connection string. So now what we will do is the workflow file is ready. So let me just try to make some small change to the README file. So maybe let me edit it. Let me add a small text sample change to check workflow. So let me commit it. So it's going to commit to the main branch. So go to the actions. Yeah, if you see, there's a new pipeline being triggered, and if you see, this is the workflow name. Let's go to the build. Yeah, this is the workflow file which we saw. Let me go and show you again. Yeah, so this is the job name which we are seeing here. I think there are some errors. Let me check that. It's good we are able to see some errors. Okay, I think I have not uploaded the secrets properly. So let me go and change it. So the CDN name. I'm sorry, I did another copy paste. Let me copy it properly. And then the profile name. And then the resource group. Then we have the credentials. So let me pause the video so that my credentials are not exposed. Yeah, I have updated my credentials and I have created a new role. So let us try to make some change again, or maybe let's try to run the action. I mean, the workflow if it's possible. Yeah, we will rerun all jobs. So the job has started. Let's see if it is successful this time. Yeah, so now the code is, the source code checkout is successful. The Azure login is successful. So in our case, the error was the login credentials were not right. So please double check if your credentials are right. And then, yeah, the stage where the HTML files are deployed to the static website is also done. So let's go and check our container. So we will just refresh. Yes, so if you see the demo2.html page is being uploaded to the container. So let's use our domain and check. Name is static web page demo2.html. Yeah, finally we got the output, which is the content of which is the contents present in the demo2.html file. So let's wait for all the steps to get completed, and finally the Azure logout is done, and the runner gets killed as well. And yeah, I think we are finally done with the demo, and we have seen how to use GitHub Actions to continuously integrate and deploy our changes. Yeah, you can try this your side, and you can also let me know if there are any doubts. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.